Hello everyone, my name is AJ, and I don't have a good intro. Today's video was supposed to be a redesign of Belphegor for my AU Hekuva boss, but I've been a little low on mental bandwidth lately and didn't feel like doing any research, so I thought it would be fun to do my Sins of Pride instead. The two Sins of Pride that we have are Lucifer and Charlotte Morningstar. Both will appear in the Bed and Breakfast for Former Baddies Season 1, so they've already got designs, but since Hekuva boss is intended to be a prequel set in medieval times, I get to have fun designing them in some alternate outfits. Starting with Lucifer. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with Lucifer. Lucifer is old, incredibly old, unimaginably old. He was in the room when God was making plans for the earth. He knows roughly what's supposed to happen, and he does his best to ruin it, but every attempt so far hasn't worked. Since he does have a knowledge of the future, I thought it would be fun to put him in clothing that doesn't exist yet. I have definitively decided that the events of Hekuva boss are going to take place in the mid-13th century during the Dark Ages, specifically around the time of the Black Death. This is the time period that a lot of fantasy is set. It's an iconic time. Directly after it is a time period that I haven't appreciated as much as I should have, the Renaissance. It was during the Renaissance that the stagnant culture of the West started to make major improvements in art, science, and philosophy. This was the time of Leonardo da Vinci, for example. I wanted to base Lucifer's outfit off of this time period, far enough ahead of everyone else to stand out, but not so far ahead that he looks out of place. If I put him in modern clothing, for example, he would stick out like a sore thumb, but since there's only a difference of 100 years, he looks like he belongs, especially since all of the other sins are from distinctly different cultures and often different time periods of extreme variety. I started like I always do, gathering up all my references. From what I was able to research, Renaissance fashion, especially for royalty, was a copious amount of fabric, especially big puffy sleeves. I also decided to use Leonardo da Vinci specifically as a reference because I like his hat. Lucifer is responsible for designing the bodies of sinners that end up in hell, which does sort of make him an artist, and I wanted to emphasize this more in his design than I usually do. The other four designs that I've made for him all have specific purposes that they serve. His more casual form with the blonde hair is based off of a waiter, like he's trying to serve up sin. His main form takes a lot more inspiration from Husband's Lucifer, with a ringleader being one of the main themes. I wanted him to be over the top, sickeningly sweet as a waiter, and for the main one, an older, vaguely Victorian gentleman that could be either cute, kind, or creepy, depending on how I choose to write and pose him. Then of course there's his false god form for tricking mortals, and the iconic seven-headed serpent. Each form important, and each one representative of a different part of his character. I have decided to give him a total of 3 more forms in this video. This first one will be his main one in Hekuva boss, so it has the most inspirations. The thing I was most certain of for this form is that I wanted him to have that big puffy round hat that Leonardo wears. It's the part of his outfit that is most easily recognizable as being from a future time period. Just like with his top hat, I had his horns sticking out of the brim. The way that the hat fell over his head also made the wing shards on the side of his head look like big droopy ears, which makes him even cuter. My first pass on the gross undersketch looked kind of like a bathrobe. I promise we will fix that. I also knew for this pose I wanted an energy that was halfway between the two energies of those two forms. Waiter is super friendly and over the top cute. Prince is reserved and impersonal. This one is reserved but also cute. I wanted it to look like you've just encountered him in the hallway as he's taking his character pages to his vault, and he'd love to show them to you if you'd like. Now we're on the second pass of the design where I refine him a lot more. I followed my reference pretty closely, where the top sleeve around the shoulder is built almost like a mushroom that pinches in towards the stem, but the stem is also very fat and loose, finally ending in a cuff at the wrist. This wrist part has a similar shape to his shackles, but does a good job of covering them up. I also gave him a full king's robe, complete with lots of fur around the collar and borders. I gave him a knee-length tunic in the first pass, but it felt too generic time period-wise for me, so I switched it out for puffy over-the-top pants instead, which does a better job indicating time period, but also tie into the clown theming that I've ignored up until now except for the cheek spots. All of the wing shards that he has on his body I've simplified into much smaller spikes to make them easier to animate. I love the way that the long shards on the ankle look like on the other forms, but since there's more happening in this outfit, it's better for them to be smaller. I am thinking about reducing their size and flexibility in the other two forms as well to make things simpler for myself, except for in the king's outfit, the prince outfit I mean. I like them being really long there. It would be the other shards that I simplify. For colors, I initially kept the same palette as my other designs, but soon added an even darker red for his coat. Then I had the idea to make the fur of the coat and some of the other details made out of actual gold. There is such thing as golden thread, which is probably what the detailing on the brim of the hat and the sleeves is made out of. I think it would be really interesting if the golden fur, though, came from a sort of mythological animal. There's a golden ram from Greek mythology called the Chrysomalos? Huffy, put the word on screen. And I think that would be a good candidate for this creature, whatever it is. The color that I actually had the hardest time deciding on was his hair color. Lucifer changes his hair color as frequently as he changes clothes. Something that I've decided about the different forms, and this applies to all shapeshifters, is that they remain in the same state that they were when you shifted out of them. So if Lucifer gets injured in one and switches to an uninjured one, if he switches back to the one that was injured, it'll still be injured when he gets back into it. It's like changing different bodies, like the status effects still apply. What this also means is that his hair across different forms is in different states of growth. He has to dye his hair in order to change its color, so when it grows out again, it grows back into its natural color, silver. On his waiter form, you can see the silver roots underneath the blonde. There are so many different combinations of colors that I could use, it's hard to pick. Did I want a full blonde? What about red with pinkish roots to match his eyes? What about a pure silver? Maybe pure red? Maybe pink? I can't do white because that would blend in with his skin, and I wasn't really feeling black. What I ultimately landed on was a very light dusty red that I replaced all of his silver with. Then I took his lightest red from his other designs and lowered the opacity on the hair until I got what I wanted. A pink that didn't overpower him but didn't make him look too soft either. Something else that I was excited for with this form is that Lilith and Lucifer are still together during the events of Hekuva Boss, and how them still being together would affect his design. I forget if I mentioned this in the official timeline publicly, but during the events of the Bed and Breakfast for Former Baddies, Lilith has been missing for about 100 years. I think it was originally supposed to be a different number until I refined everything in the timeline to make things make more sense. That means she's had thousands of years with Lucifer, and Lilith is a menace. I actually had an idea for an episode where IMP gets commissioned by Lilith herself to steal a Bible from the human world. The printing press won't be invented for another 100 years, so Bibles are rare. They have to be copied by hand, which means they are very expensive and easily tampered with. Lilith needs one, and she specifically wanted one with the clearest translation they can find, so that she can use it for her evil purposes. To bonk her husband on the head while he's sleeping and make him bawl. Lucifer keeps cheating on her with immensely powerful demons from every culture he can find, especially with anything halfway resembling a snake or dragon, which means lots of worms, and she's sick of it. So she makes him bald so no one will want him. Also, his scalp makes a funny noise when she throws cheese at it. Or mayonnaise, or ham. She likes throwing things at his bald spot when he's working. He deserves this. She's been making him bald for years now, but she has to do it by carefully pulling out a few hairs at a time without waking him up. But he just switches forms when he notices the balding, so her efforts are being thwarted. The Bible will be the most time-efficient means of making him bald and keeping the hair from growing back as fast, because it's just one donk and then the bald spot. And a nice big one too. I had some other ideas for some other outfits. These two are both more modern ones. The first one of these is a pair of jammies. In the original Has-Been Hotel, Lucifer is supposed to be mega depressed, but he chills around in his house in a full suit and a top hat. He looks great, but it's just so silly that I have a hard time taking it seriously. It makes everyone feel like they're wearing costumes instead of clothing, so I wanted to rectify that by giving him some very cute and very merchandisable jammies. Speaking of merchandise, merchandise, I have some. Me and my friend Ducky made merch of 20 of the most important characters of Season 1 of the Bed and Breakfast for Former Baddies that you can buy on Ko-fi or Etsy. We also have Lucifer's sketchbook for sale, and some clothing based on nervous dog harnesses for people that are nervous, violent, and stupid. Thank you all for your support. I think the best jammies ever are a short sleeve t-shirt and sweatpants. I cannot sleep in long sleeves, even in the winter. I can't stand it. But I can't stand not wearing long pants either, because then my skin touches and I hate it. So what to theme these after? Well, the OG Lucifer is obsessed with ducks because subversion, though I do support this even if it is a teeny bit cliche. I think geese would be fitting for mine. What is a goose if not a duck, but violent with teeth? So I made a simple little pattern square that would be easy to clip to the pants. I drew one goose standing, one on its back, one that was sitting, one that was running, 2 gosling, 2 knives, and a bunch of blood. I made the background a dark red, kept everything in shades of red and gray, and clipped it to the pants easily just like I wanted to. For the shirt, I wrote the text "Silly Goose" because my boy is a silly goose, and but that was too plain, so I put a picture. I can't stand this. Oh my goodness, it's gonna be editing the Minecraft video all over again where I can't speak and I keep stuttering and everything sucks. I need to do like some vocal warm-ups or something before I start recording. For the shirt, I wrote the text "Silly Goose" because my boy is a silly goose, but that was too plain, so I put a picture of a goose with a knife on the back. Even though that doesn't really make sense because I drew his heads poking out of the back. On him, that shirt has a slit in the back for his heads. The actual merchandise, if ever I make it, maybe I made it before this video went up, I don't know. It will not have that slit. The other one that I drew on this page is simultaneously one of my favorite outfits for him, but also one that deeply embarrasses me. You see, I was thinking about Yu-Gi-Oh! When I was drawing this, and I was specifically thinking about his blue leather jacket that flares out in the most insane way. I wanted that. I wanted to put my boy in leather and spandex. This is the design that I really wanted to give the sin of pride, and specifically an over-the-top cocky look at me type way. I gave him a leather jacket with a high collar just like I wanted. I considered making the collar part similar to Adam's, but I really need to stop reusing that 3-pronged shape. I've done it so many times now. I just really like Adam's design. Sometimes you just get it right the first time, what can I say? Underneath, I gave him a full-body jumpsuit that's skin tight around the chest and then flares out into bell bottoms at the lower legs. But you know, it just wasn't enough yet. I needed this to be even more over the top. So I got out a chain brush and gave that idiot some emo chains. I want the events of Hekuva Boss to be directly responsible for the setup of BBFFB, and one of those events is the implementation of the exterminations. I will go into more detail about this when I get to my Blitz video, probably. But for right now, what is important to know is that it's not until Hekuva Boss that Heaven starts getting more involved in Hell's affairs, and one of those is rebinding Lucifer as punishment for allowing his descendants to meddle with Earth. He will be bound down with heavy chains that keep him from moving beyond his castle and limit his powers. He can still get out of these, but in order to do that, he has to chip through each individual link, which took him hundreds of years. This form was when he was in an in-between stage where he had gotten most but not all of them off. To compensate for his lack of power, he gets even cockier and more annoying than usual. He tries to make his chains look like a stylistic choice rather than imprisonment, since there's no way to hide them. He also tries to look way cooler than he is. Part of my concept for this was old man desperately trying to look cool to younger generations. He's got a lot more wrinkles around his mouth, eyes, and nose area than normal because he can't stop them from coming in. I was going to go for another red and gold palette, but I didn't like it. I also tried a red and blue palette that I didn't like either. Blue just doesn't look right on my boy. So I tried a red and gray palette and I liked that much better, eventually finally landing on red, silver, and black. I had a darker gray in there for a while and I did like it, but ultimately decided that I liked black better. It gave him more of the illusion of youth that he would realistically try to go for, while also being pretty cool. Ultimately, I'm really happy with all of these forms. I want his jammies, and now it is finally time for Charlotte. I had actually sketched out some concept art of Charlotte before she transitioned. before this, a long time ago. Funny story, I doodled this on stream halfway through a sister location playthrough. I rage quit on night 4 so bad that I stopped talking entirely for like 30 minutes and just sketched until I felt better. I hate myself. Until I finally went back to the game. I drew her in her Halloween costume, which was originally conceptualized to be her old Overlord fit, but I've since decided against it. I have instead relegated it to just a Halloween costume, so that way I can make her real one more historically accurate for medieval Slovakia. The initial plan was to just take this design, use it as is, and just change the clothes, but no matter how much I fiddled with it, I just hated it. It's ugly, it's disgusting, it's repulsive, it's not Charlotte. I don't know what I was thinking. Charlotte is not a beefcake. She's a picture of grace, elegance, and refined intelligence. This is just not that. Maybe for a different character I would like it, but now actually seeing it with like well done liner, I just don't. Away it goes. Starting over as quickly as possible because that design was my first attempt at Carmilla levels of terrible. This time I decided to edit her character page directly. That way I was certain that I would keep her vibe correct. I did use my horrible first attempt as a reference because as much as I hate it, I did like some of the ideas that were there even though my execution was terrible. I liked the hat. The hat was probably my favorite part. I also liked the black fur that has similar shapes to her suit. I liked the cuffs around the wrists, and I liked the red robe. Pretty much all of the outfit was good, it just needed to get good. I also liked the facial changes. Her skin tone being the same as her demon form was a good idea, and it also serves to like make this form look more depressed and dead and just not as alive as she is when she's transitioned. I also liked that her horns are more like a ram's and curl around her wing shards, and my favorite part was the swirl that curves into the eye. Overall, I wanted this form to have more elements of her demon form present to convey that in the past she was a lot more monstrous and demonic. In the new execution, the hat swishes the hair swoop all the way down, which makes her look emo and troubled and gives her a little bit of awkward teenager energy, which I think is absolutely perfect. I ditched the rounded collar and decided to fuse it into just a turtleneck. It does like still have a line through it indicating that it is 2 individual pieces, but it's easier to draw like this. I also made the fluff bigger so not quite as much of the underrobe is exposed. I made the sleeves looser fitting around the arms to convey the idea that she doesn't feel quite like she fits into the role that she's been assigned and doesn't really like her body. I exaggerated the wrist cuffs for a similar reason. If you look closely, you'll also see that I edited the position of the hand just a bit so that her pointer finger, which in the original pose is stretched out and open, is curling inward just a little bit. She's not quite as much of an open, soft person yet. And just like in the first attempt, I gave her a robe that went all the way down to the ankle with a black border in the center of it and a belt at the waist. This time though, I made them much thicker so the outfit wasn't just plain and it didn't have to deform around the weird bends of the knee and ankle like it does in the original. Oh, that distortion around the legs just looks so strange and I hate it. Once I had edited all of that in, I made a subtle change to the body type. Some of you already know, some of you have probably figured it out, and some of you don't know because I've never said it on my YouTube channel publicly before, or at least not explicitly until this video. Charlotte is trans. She was born a man and later became a woman in the 19th century when sexism wasn't quite as bad. We're talking late 19th century. All of Lucifer's children are shapeshifters, at least a little bit, so all of them can make this same change at any time they want. Charlotte is the only one who's made this change permanent instead of using it as a way to trick, tempt, or mess with other people. I think subconsciously the reason why I started with a more muscly design was to make this difference more obvious, but that's dumb and stupid and it doesn't fit. Even still though, I did want some bodily differences because the fact of the matter is that men and women are different. So as a man, Charlie is a teeny bit taller and wider. However, exercise in a way that we understand it now hadn't yet been invented, so he's also skinnier in the arms. Modern Charlotte does have visible abs. I'm just bad at drawing them. Charles does not. But Charles does have a greater ability to gain muscle than Charlotte does. Some other little details I'd like to point out that I made are the eyebrow, which I styled to have similar shapes to her eyelashes, and the little goat's beard, which I shaped the same as her hair swoop. I also drastically shortened the hair, so the part at the end where it brushes out all spiky is now at the neck. The demon form did also need a few changes since imps, specifically worms, which are the species of imp of the Pride Ring, do have some sexual dimorphism, specifically in the horns. So I gave him some big ram's horns, again curled around the wing shard, but bigger this time. I did finally notice a mistake on the character sheet that I totally forgot to correct months ago, and that is the webbing on the wing shard. That's not supposed to be there. I thought I got rid of that. It must have slipped my mind. Oopie! I did get rid of that though, so it's all fine. Colors were pretty simple. I wanted to keep her usual palette, so I filled in the underrobe in red, made the accents dark gray and black everywhere else. I was going to take out the white streak in her hair since she's much younger here, but it just didn't look right without it, so it stays. The only part I was unsure of was the cape in the back. I was going to make it silver like her hair is in the original, but I didn't like it, so I tried a few more things until I eventually landed on a yellow to gold to black gradient. The fur was looking a little boring, so I tried adding the same patterns to it that I did with Mammon's fluff, but I didn't really like it, so I tried several different iterations of stripes and then spots and then striped spots, finally landing on just a simple fluff texture. The skirt was looking really boring too. Since there was such a huge area of just nothing there, it made the bust area look really overcrowded in comparison since there's a lot more detail there. I had the same problem in the original and I tried to use gradients to fix it, but I hated that, so I knew not to do that. Instead, what I decided to do was to stack a few different skirts on top of each other. The top one is the red one, underneath that is a black, then gray, and then gold. I liked that much better. I also gave the gray one some more fur texture to really make it feel like it's tied into the fur at the top. Then I finished off the demon form by putting in the stripes on the horns and putting some white back into the mane, and finally a little white throat patch that I like to imagine would inflate like a bullfrog. Overall, very happy with this one. I love Charlie so much no matter what form she's in. She's my precious baby. Legitimately, she's one of my favorite characters from the original show, despite all of her horrible writing and flaws. And she is also my favorite here in my own work. There are 3 more characters I'd like to design. I was going to make a separate video about all of the has-been pets forever ago, but I just didn't have quite enough to say about them to stretch that to a full 15 minutes. Let's start with Kiki. My version of Kiki will be used in the story more as an item than a character. She can turn into a variety of small items, including of course a key and more importantly Charlotte's briefcase. I thought about also giving her a battle kitty form, but considering that Charlotte can already turn into a giant dragon, that's really unnecessary. I thought it would be fun if I made Kiki a Hellcat, specifically from the Gluttony ring. I started with a sleek kitty base and of course kept the singular eye, otherwise it wouldn't look like Kiki. I had the idea to put teeth around the eye, not all the way around because that would be really annoying to animate, but a few. I decided to turn the 3 fur flecks on the sides of her face into teeth as well, and I fully turned her ears into mouths with teeth positioned almost like a beak. I also gave her a mane going down her back. Instead of a regular collar, I decided to give her a metal shackle around her neck. I thought about making her tail match full Demon Charlie's, but instead changed it to the thin one with the fork at the end. After that, I drew her as the briefcase. When she becomes a briefcase, her tail turns into a handle, her eye goes smack dab in the middle, teeth on the sides framing the top and bottom edges, and the backside looks exactly the same. I was actually thinking that Charlotte could use Kiki as an impromptu weapon. She'd be a great weapon like this. I think the tail could unwind so she could become a type of flail, and she's also going to be a nice heavy blunt weapon, perfect for close range combat, and for all intents and purposes she's covered in knives, so you could stab people with her. I took the same design philosophy with her as a key, not much to say there. I did decide to give her the mane back in this form, so she's all fluffy. For colors, I kept her strictly to Charlotte's palette, not Charles. She's mostly black with yellow eyes and red hair. All of her teeth are gray, and so is her collar. I thought about giving Kiki cheek spots to indicate that Charlotte owns her soul, but Kiki doesn't actually have a soul, so I took them off. I was thinking that since Kiki's mouths are where her ears should be, she has to turn her head fully upside down in order to eat. To make that work better, I put the tongues on the roof of the mouth, which also makes them easier to see what they're actually supposed to be. I think it would be cute if Kiki was actually gifted to Charles from Beelzebub when the event happened so that he'd have a new pet to take care of. I guess technically Kiki isn't a part of Hekuva Boss because he wouldn't get her until after the event, which takes place either at the end or afterwards off screen, depending on whether or not how we decide to depict that event on screen and in how much detail. But there are two characters, and I say characters loosely, from Hazbin Hotel that I did decide to turn into Hekuva Boss exclusive characters, Razzle and Dazzle. In the original, Razzle and Dazzle are two little lamb dragon things that serve Charlie but don't really do much except appear in the back and turn into big dragons in the final battle, only for them to immediately die. They really felt like they don't have any purpose at all other than merchandising, and it astounds me because Charlie has Kiki already, so they're completely redundant. If we wanted something to get big and grow wings, make it Kiki. I think it would have been better to write them out completely because they do nothing except just take up space on the screen. And since I have Charlie gonna be turning into a giant dragon, there's no point in putting in two more giant dragons. Since Charles is Slavic, I thought it would be a good idea to make Razzle and Dazzle based off of demon designs from that area. I don't know how I would even begin to describe this aesthetic other than like evil little beasties. I do like it, while at the same time I don't like it. There were several designs in the references I was given where they had these really gross pelvis faces that I absolutely hated, so of course they had to go in. I sketched myself some quick poses, then jumped right into the line art. These two are going to be servants, and they're pretty small, so they needed to be extra simple. I started with Razzle. I used the green demon with his back to us as my main inspiration for what I wanted her to look like. I gave her a very similar face shape. The nose was wigging me out, specifically in the area of how it affected the slope of the face. I was going to put a horn at the end of it, but a full flesh nose worked much better. I wasn't planning on making any gender changes to these guys, but when I drew in her permanently angry brow, it sloped perfectly into an eyelash, so I gave her some darker lips, and when I zoomed out, I discovered I had drawn another ugly old lady, and I loved it. What a queen. I still gave her a beard. Clothes I wasn't really sure what to do because of the wings, and the wings would get in the way, but also because the demons in my reference material are always naked, and if I covered them up, then their rump faces wouldn't be visible, so what I decided on was just an apron, and that's it. I made Razzle's legs significantly smaller than my sketch indicated, and that was for the best. I like this much better. Several of my references depicted the feet as very bird-like, so I went with that, and I think it fit perfectly. For the rump face, I put the eyes on the back, and I was going to make the tail just like a regular human nose, but if I did that, I would have had to draw in the mouth, and...
That's where the trouble began. That smile. That damn smile.
I just couldn't. It's too gross. It's disgusting. So I made the tail really thick with the point at the end, except it's still a nose, and I will draw the nostrils later. This is the most uncomfortable body horror I've ever created. Dazzle I struggled a lot more with. A lot of my references depicted demons as having very flat faces, often looking very similar to old men. I wanted to give him a flattered face, but I just hated it. I hated it! So what I did was I focused in on one of the dragons in the background of one of my references that I hadn't noticed before. I thought he was super stinking adorable. According to the wiki, Razzle and Dazzle are supposed to have very different personalities, even though they look almost identical. One is supposed to be silly, and I don't really know about the other one, and I'm also not sure which one is which, and I didn't feel like trying harder to figure out what it is. After I figured out Dazzle's face, everything else fell into place pretty easy. Just like with Kiki, I wanted to stick strictly to Charlie's palette, and since these guys are Hekuva Boss exclusives, I thought it would be best to stick to Charles's palette specifically. And man, was I grateful that Charles was a blinged up boy, because a lot of my references used a lot of gold in them, so I wanted at least one of them to be gold. I made Razzle gold. The other one I made a dark gray like this reference. This reference looked silly, and Dazzle is silly, therefore Dazzle must look like reference. And I gave them both red hair, but just like the OGs. Just like Kiki, they both use gray for all of the areas that I would have made white if they were main characters. Off camera, I did try making them inversions of each other, where Razzle would be gold with black hair and Dazzle would be black with gold hair, but I didn't like that. Besides that, I've made so many changes from the original that I really do need to keep something from the OGs. I very nearly forgot their cheek spots to indicate that Charles owns them, and then they were all done. In terms of the roles they would play, they're still servants. Razzle is supposed to act as Charles' scribe, and Dazzle fetches him things, along with other personal assistance roles that they both share. I had temporarily given them birth and death dates because I seriously considered making them sinners. Razzle even had a backstory planned, but I decided against it. I have actually decided that they are a Slavic variant of the imps from the Wrath Ring. In my AU, I've decided that imp is a social class, not a species, so each ring has a species of imp that are entirely different. In Wrath, that species is kobolds. Kobolds are a very low-ranking species of dragon, with the only dragons that are lower than them being worms, which are from Pride. For anyone who might have missed this lore, I believe it was in my Lilith video, but I do forget. The way that demon rankings work is that the older and longer lived a species is, the higher ranking it is. All Hellborn species come from Lilith and Lucifer. The first generation all die within the day, as is the nature of Lilith's curse, even with how many eggs she lays. But some of them are able to lay their own eggs or have their own young before they kick the can. Each generation after is longer and longer lived, with more and more magic, and usually they get more and more intelligent and also bigger over time. Until you finally get like a species of demons that we would actually call demons instead of hellborn creatures. Worms are the most recent of species, and as such have the shortest lives, least amount of power, and lowest social status, along with being physically the smallest. Charles does have plenty of worm servants, but chooses to use kobolds as his personal servants because they are of higher status, so it's not as embarrassing to be seen with them. But it's also because of practical reasons. Kobolds are better adapted at walking on two legs. Something else I wanted to mention is that when I was doing, like, the barest bones amount of research, I found the story where this kobold was hanging out in this guy's house, and this rotten little kid threw nasty water at him, so the kobold epically pranked him by leaving his dismembered body cooking on the stove. Very Razzle-coded. She would do that. She hates children. Dazzle would also help by putting the pot on the stove and burning himself in the process. I don't think that Dazzle knows he exists. They're not the most dangerous of demons, but they'll getcha. Regrettably, I don't have much planned story-wise for Lucifer and Charles at this time. I would need to see how they're used in the upcoming Season 3 before I make any decisions. I will say though, Charles is planned to appear in the Mastermind episode, and there will eventually be an episode where excrement hits the fan and even Lucifer himself will have to appear. Probably not in Season 1 or 2 though. If you would like to see more of Charlotte though, scenes 1 through 4 of the first episode of The Bed and Breakfast for Former Baddies are available to read on my Patreon right now for my $5 patrons. Speaking of which, an extra special thank you goes out to all of my patrons: JRDS, CDN Redneck 05, Immortal Jesse, Mercer Scott Holt, Stephen Drake, The Fun Guy, Chase Johnson, Honey, QB, Jay Draws, and Silent Savvy. You are all the greatest. Thank you again so much for watching. Check out the merch, I take commissions, and don't forget to transition into the like button. Bye-bye!